is Arts Alive. I'm Lynda Philippi. My guest is Steve Long, and he's returning to kind of pick up where we left off last time, which is talking about his novel in progress. So welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you could be here
well,
again.
It's fun. Yeah, thank you.
So let's kind of just do a recap for our viewers.
Okay. Well, I had done a book a couple of years ago, and just had a great time. The second book sort of doesn't pick up where the other one left off. It's really positioned in the middle of that book.
Okay.
There's a scene where one of the characters, a minor character, leaves for a couple of weeks, and the reader doesn't really know where he goes. So the second book is about those 2 weeks, where he goes, why he feels compelled to do that.
And at the time that you're writing about, are you referencing back to the characters at all from the original book?
A little bit, yeah. In fact, just because I thought it would be fun, there's a phone conversation that in the first book you see from that protagonist's point of view.
Oh.
And in the second book, it's the same dialogue, but the scene is set in another place at the receiving end.
So when you were talking about this, you know, what came to my mind was you're reading an article, I don't know, online or Wikipedia or something, then all of a sudden you get the hyperlink, click,
sure.
and you zoom yourself into another reality.
Right.
So that's what we're doing with this book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so neither of these characters are exemplary. I think if you're going to have a character arc, you can't start at the top.
No.
You know, you have to, if the character is going to grow, they have to have encountered some difficulty, or they need to be imperfect.
Sure.
And these guys sure are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's, I mean, you were sort of talking about developing the character and kind of how you do that. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, sure. There is a process for doing that, at least the process that I learned, and it was really helpful. If I step back a bit and talk about before I started taking classes to do this, I really wanted to write. But when I tried to write, the results were abysmal. And I thought, you know, I just wasn't gifted with this talent, and too bad for me. What I found out was there are things that you can do that are not really mechanical. It's not like filling in the blanks. But there is a way to build up a character. And so when I did that, when I learned to do that, then particularly in a literary novel, which is a character-driven novel, when you really know who that person is and know what's called a pathological maneuver, then when you put pressure on them, you know how they're going to react because you know what their maneuver is.
You know the character.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. I just finished reading a biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder, you know, that Little House on the Prairie.
Right.
And of course, like every little girl, I devoured those books when I was a kid, just absolutely loved them. But what's interesting about her biography is, you know, her sort of evolution, her own, you know, character arc or whatever, evolution as a writer. How much her daughter, who was an editor in San Francisco, how much her daughter really helped sort of shape some of those stories.
Sure.
But in the end, what a real strong, clear vision she had in terms of character development. And she would fight with everybody and say, my characters don't do that. You know, Ma would not say this, Laura would not do this. And to feel so strongly about the characters that she'd created, that like you're saying, that's what characterizes literature, shall we say, or whatever, that to know that. And I just thought the whole thing was really fascinating. It's another perspective of on the books that, you know, you loved as a child, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think, and I sure went through this too, when you start out, I think you don't have that confidence. And you want some feedback, and you can get that in, you know, from family members or friends. You can get it from a class or a critique group. But what can happen is if you have 8 people, you're going to get 8 opinions.
Right.
And you have to be strong enough within yourself or have a clear enough vision to not be bounced around like a ping pong ball.
Right.
And that gets to, because I've now been through this process, and I've gotten both praise and criticism, you come to the point that you realize this is your work. It's great. I mean, I don't know everything, and I've certainly made bunches of mistakes. But at some point, you have to say, no, your idea was a good idea. It's not this book, but it's a good idea for in another time.
Right, because I know my character.
I know my character. And I think almost always, for me anyway, I can read something and I'm sort of editing in my head. I may really like the book, but think that, you know, I wouldn't have had her do that. I would have had her do something else. Or, is that really true? Do people really act like that? Or was this for the convenience of the author to have the person, what I would say, overreact or react inappropriately? But, you know, it's fiction and you just tolerate a certain amount of that.
And sort of too, I think when you feel like it's really well done, you're not pausing to ask yourself those questions.
Right.
Anything that makes you stop and think and sort of take yourself out of just being pulled along by the story, that's when it kind of feels funny. You know, like you say, maybe that's not quite right.
It's, which we've talked about this before, that there's a contract between the author and the reader, and the author says, I'm going to create this world, this dream, and I'm not going to do anything to wake us both up, to shake us out of this dream. And when that happens, you've not fulfilled your part of the bargain, because the reader stops and says, I don't think so. I don't think that that's true to human nature, if it's that kind of a story.
So when you decided to write the second book, when you were writing the first book and the character went away, at the time, did you think, gosh, I could really take this, but that's just not within the scope of this story?
Actually, I did.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, and I have to say, the protagonist of the second book is probably my favorite character of all time.
Okay, good.
You know, at least for me.
Yeah.
And really based on not only people that I knew in real life, but a sort of I think an iconic American person who would be characterized by Gus McCrae, maybe.
Okay.
In Lonesome Dove.
Yeah.
Or,
one of my very favorite characters.
Oh, it's just a marvelous, marvelous job. Or another slant on that would be Willie Nelson's "Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys."
Okay.
And as I listened to that song, I thought, isn't that sort of iconically American? That here's a guy who loves puppies and girls of the night. And we tolerate that. We think that maybe it's understanding that we're weak or that we're flawed, but basically good-hearted.
You hope your daughter doesn't marry him.
No, yeah. Let him grow up to be a cowboy, just stay away from me. Or my kids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But no, I think if you look at Fonzie or Huckleberry Finn, they all had an element of not a bad boy, which I think is another kind of a character, but just somebody that doesn't quite conform.
Kind of like that, a little bit of that Peter Pan syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Where, yes, I had a husband like that.
Ah.
So I was talking about this the other day.
I noticed the past tense.
Yeah, it's really charming,
Sure.
especially when they're young. And as they get older and older, it sort of becomes less charming and starts to seem more like a character flaw.
Right.
Because we expect people to attain a level of maturity and responsibility and all those sort of dull things that make society work.
I have heard people, and I think probably only women, say, why am I always the adult in this relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's the kind of a guy. I knew that coincidentally this character is a truck driver, and I've had some relationship with guys like that. And they just, they're pretty nice. They're basically good-hearted, but not afraid of getting in a scrape, not afraid of cutting corners, and so that's what this fellow is. And I I actually, 2 mornings ago, I finished the final rewrite.
Did you? Wow.
So this was
okay.
kind of a milestone.
Yeah.
And what I hope isn't the case is that the ending is a little sappy. I don't think it is. I don't want a Disney ending, you know, where it's kind of everything's clear cut and oh my goodness, he's reformed and his wife takes him back and all
He's
this.
shaved, he's got on his Sunday suit and
Yeah, that's no good.
So have you shopped it to your eight different voices?
No, I actually, what I'm going to do, I said I'm finished with the rewrite, and that's true. But this book is more complicated in that there's more characters, and it spans many time periods. And what my teacher used to call the dreaded flashback. I can really stop the movement of a story.
Yeah, yeah.
So rather than a flashback within a scene, I've broken out these various periods and written and rewritten them independently, almost as a standalone story. But for dramatic effect, I want to now go back and redistribute those into the story, and that's what I'm working on now. So it's not quite ready to be.
So it's not a situation where you've got like a chapter and then the next chapter goes back 10 years and then the following chapter jumps back to the present. Is it like that?
Well, it can be.
Okay.
I think that there's sort of a technique or a trick or something. I'm reading All the Light We Cannot See.
Oh, I like that book.
And if you notice that the chapters are very short and they go back and forth, both between characters and between times.
Right, right.
And so in a commercial sense, I think short chapters are sort of, they're like, snacks. And you think, oh, just one more. And so you talk about a page turner, and I think that's one of the things that keeps us turning the pages.
So I'll tell you that for me as a reader, I have been known to do this. If I can figure out that the book is going to be, alternating all the way through, I read one story all the way through, and then I go back and read the other story all the way
fair.
through. I know.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I also read the end of the book first.
Oh, no.
I'm one of those people. And now you don't want to talk to me anymore. But I have done that with books, and then I'll just go back and read the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Okay.
It's just I'm a weirdo. I like to do it like that.
Well, I wouldn't do that, but I'm trying to think. Larry McMurtry wrote, I think it was Anything for Billy.
I didn't read that.
About Billy the Kid, and the chapters there would be a page or 2 pages. And I don't think it was nearly his best work, but it was an entertaining.
It's
good enough.
Sort of experimental, perhaps, like
could have been.
playing around with a different technique.
Sure, yeah, but that was real different.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm up to now.
Wow. So you're further along the path than you were.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you were here, we were talking, maybe it's been like 6 weeks or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been at this pretty diligently. I get up early and write as best I can for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I have to get ready and go to my real job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that gives you some structure and some discipline too. You do it and then you can think about what you want to do next time, right?
Yeah. I know I've told you this, that at one point I had a grant to write a book. And you get so spoiled because all your time is your own. And I would get all settled and I would write for 4 or 5 hours, and it was terrific. And I just don't have that luxury now. So, but you can get a lot done in a couple hours.
I'm sure that that's true. Steve, okay, we don't have anybody flashing at us, but we're out of time.
Okay.
So we have to wrap it up, and thank you very much for being here today. I
Oh, it's
really
always
appreciate that.
So fun. Thank
Okay,
you.
see you
All
next time.
Okay.